What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, August 7th, 2018, getting into the week here. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Today's a very, very busy news day, a lot going on, not all of it good. And so let's just get right on into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to put you on the air with your comments and questions. Turning to Iran, which appears to be heating up, tensions are flaring over there. Moscow is saying that Iran's nuclear deal is durable and the U.S. decision to reimpose sanctions very disappointing. Now, Iran is saying that they're open to talks with the United States, but not while the sanctions are in place. So there's a deadlock there. And basically, pretty much the whole world, except for Israel, is disapproving of what's being done to Iran right now. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif met with his North Korean counterpart Ri Yong-ho in Tehran earlier today, on the same day that the sanctions basically were reimposed on the Islamic Republic. Now, Agent Press reported Zarif welcomed Ri and a team of officials at the foreign ministry in Iran's capital, but no statement has been made to reporters. Ri is on a two-day visit to Tehran and is due to meet with President Hassan Rouhani tomorrow, and the two sides are discussing bilateral relations and regional issues. So basically, the U.S. policy toward Iran, like we've seen in so many of these other countries, it's pushing these countries out of our sphere of influence and into other spheres of influence here. Down in Syria, ISIS cells in eastern al-Sawadiyah face military action by the Syrian army. And the SSA artillery and Syrian Air Force carried out about 50 strikes on ISIS targets in the areas of al-Wa'ir, Ard al-Qara'a, Mazriya al-Hatib, Sneem al-Girs, and east of Dabatha. And Syrian media is saying ISIS suffered heavy casualties in these strikes, but there are no photos or videos that have been released to basically document that at this point here. Now, up in Afghanistan, the Afghan Ministry of Defense has confirmed U.S. Special Forces have been deployed to the western province of Farah near the border with Iran. And basically, the spokesman, Mohammed Radmanesh, said the deployment aimed to train Afghan troops on how to use new weapons, stressing that the U.S. Special Forces would not take part in combat operations. Boy, remember when they told us that about Vietnam here? And this deployment, of course, is in direct contrast to Donald Trump's campaign promise that he was going to get us out of Afghanistan and these interventions. But then Obama made the same promise back in 2008. Now, apparently this little kerfuffle between Saudi Arabia and Canada is escalating, and it's all over the arrest of a Canadian rights activist who's now in jail in Saudi Arabia, and Canada said, we want her back. Saudi Arabia basically cut diplomatic and economic ties with Canada, and now they've suspended all flights to Canada. This thing is escalating completely out of control. Now, at one point, Saudi Arabia put out this infographic which included the skyline of Toronto and an airplane more or less aimed at the CN Tower, which is this amazing, very tall structure in Toronto. And everybody said, oh, it's a 9/11 threat. It's a 9/11 threat. Saudi Arabia has edited the plane out of the graphic now, and they've actually issued an apology. But obviously, tensions are very high between the two countries. And I have to wonder, where does Saudi Arabia think this is going to lead? They're pretty much on opposite sides of the planet. It's not like Saudi Arabia could attack Canada. Meanwhile, apparently, remember that NATO summit that was held July 11th and 12th? Apparently, it's focused on what is being called the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of the Balkan countries, and Macedonia was officially invited to join the alliance. So NATO is getting ready to set up its first airbase in the Western Balkans. Russia is not going to be happy about this, Because remember, when the Soviet Union collapsed and they were starting the Russian republics, the Western powers, primarily the U.S., said NATO will not push any further to the east than its current border, which at that time was Germany. And like every other promise made by the United States, it was almost immediately broken. Now, Israel's Minister of Intelligence says he welcomes news that a Syrian scientist was killed by a car bomb, even as Tel Aviv denies any part in the murder. The New York Times, on the other hand, is reporting that Israel's Mossad was behind the attack. So Intelligence and Transportation Minister Yisrael Katz weighed on in basically saying that assuming this scientist was indeed involved in terrorist activity, I welcome his departure from the world. Really kind-hearted people here. Now, Asbar was the research director at Syria's Scientific Studies and Research Center, which was believed to be developing long-range precision-guided missiles. And of course, they throw the obligatory, with the help of Iran in there. But he was killed with a car bomb on Saturday. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, do you remember David Rothkopf? He's this Carnegie scholar and former editor of Foreign Policy. And following the massacre that's going on in the border with Gaza, he basically came on out saying American Jews have a duty to oppose Israel. And apparently he's now escalating it, saying it's time for a boycott of Israel's government and all manner of possible pressure. So, again, Israel crossed a line there. Israel crossed a line. The massacre in Gaza, at the Gaza fence, the shooting of innocent protesters, was Israel's Amritsar. All righty, let's take a phone call from Francis in Montreal. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This is a prequel to what I have to say. I got banned off Twitter for getting into a discussion with a Zionist and posting a bunch of pictures. The worst crime of all in Gaza has been ongoing for quite a while, and that's the use of white phosphorus bombs on the civilian population, including children in Gaza by Israel, which is really the big atrocity. But my main subject is the Danforth Street shooter in Toronto. Yes. And I was actually surprised. I've watched a bit of it. I didn't want to get too deep into it, but Faith Goldie has a really good video up that everybody in your audience should go watch. And this Hussein guy who did the shooting, well, they're trying to argue that he's just mentally ill. But he's been to Afghanistan, and ISIS claimed his attack as a terrorist attack. And then I'd sort of heard a bit about this because it's popping up in all over North America, but she's tied it to it. He's got a brother. His brother is an older brother, the Hussein brothers, and the Canadian media didn't want to report on their names. And his older brother's in a coma right now. And so they had him in a hospital in a coma because he's already had prior convictions for trafficking in cocaine. Okay. And he was on probation and all this. But the point is they executed a warrant, search warrant on his basement suite in his parents' house. Mm-hmm. And while they were there, they had some firemen there, and they saw they brought in the hazmat team. There was 42 kilograms of carfentanil, which is enough to provide over 2 billion doses, equal to 2 billion doses of heroin. And what they're saying is this has nothing to do with drug trafficking, and is in fact preparations for a chemical weapons attack. They also seized a bunch of firearms, like about 30 pistols and a bunch of other stuff too. So, and this is even being tied to a broader web where they're getting, like in Europe, whole steel
Francis,
railroad
let me cut in here because I got a question. Okay, we know how certainly the American corporate media are always quick to jump and say ISIS this, ISIS that, and so I'm wondering why they would downplay this one.
Because they're downplaying a lot of this stuff. Like there was 18 pounds of carfentanil in New Jersey, which is enough to kill 18 million people.
Francis,
because they're preparing something. what they're preparing, like they're getting huge arm caches, like whole railroad cars full of weapons. And they're bringing in, now they want to bring in like, what, 800 white helmets? And like, what are they?
They're al-Nusra.
You know, like, these are military age men. Yeah. It's just bizarre, right? So this is sort of, it makes me, I'm not a survivalist really, but it makes me want to start stocking up on firearms and you know, water and food and everything. It's like, I think it's looking increasingly like they're preparing something.
Well,
and this is all over North America. They're getting these big caches of carfentanil that have no use as a drug. It's a biological weapon, or it's a chemical weapon. Anyway, it's a good video, and I don't want to take up too much of your show, but go look at his face. Goldie has it up on her YouTube while it's still there. Hopefully they won't, you know, ban her off the internet too. You know.
Well, I certainly hope not. But, you know, in any event, thank you for the information and thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And here is my concern about the idea of carfentanil being used as a biological weapon. How do you keep it from harming the people who are deploying it? That's the real issue, deployability. So anyway, I'd like to see some more documentation about the carfentanil because, again, we have a corporate media that is always quick to scream ISIS, 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 ISIS at us, and this time they downplayed it. Now, maybe Canada just decided they didn't want the Canadian people upset about an act of terror, because the Canadian people are starting to get really upset about the refugee open borders issue up there that Trudeau is continuing to enforce and promote. So who knows? Who knows? Anyway, getting on back to Israel, more reports are coming out about events during the seizure of the latest Freedom Flotilla ship. And apparently one of the eyewitnesses is saying that the Israeli forces, in addition to beating the passengers, stole thousands of dollars from them. So it really was piracy on the high seas here. Now, down in Israel, an Israeli cabinet minister is saying, well, really, Egypt bears equal responsibility for what's going on in Gaza. Basically, you know, Cairo is saying, no, we are not. And we don't want to get drawn into this Palestinian enclave. You know, right now, Egypt is trying to broker truce talks there. But Egyptian officials are saying they will resist any attempt by Israel or the United States to shift to Cairo the onus for addressing Gaza's long-term governance or economic problems. So that's Israel's attitude. It's all your fault. Article that came on out from Middle East Monitor is basically saying that the real obstacle to peace is not the illegal settlements, although obviously they're a big problem. The real obstacle to peace, as seen by both Israel and the United States, is the Palestinians demanding their right of return, which was guaranteed to them, first of all, by the United Nations, and even promised to them by Israel when Israel was being created. Now Israel wants out of the deal. So that's why Donald Trump's deal of the century, which fell flat on its face down there, was focused around this idea. We'll give you a whole bunch of money if you forget about ever going back to your homes and villages. And that one really didn't work on out. Now, I know in Donald Trump's world and Netanyahu's world, you know, with enough money, you can get anybody to do anything. But there are still people on this planet who cannot be bought at any price. And the Palestinians seem to be among them. The Palestinian Ministry of Health is warning the health facilities in Gaza may have to stop because of the fuel crisis. And they're not getting any assurances from the authorities that the fuel crisis will be resolved. And they may just have to shut down. Right now, because of the fuel crisis and cutting off of raw materials, 80% of Gaza factories have stopped operating. And basically, they're talking about this ongoing blockade. and Israel's closure of the Karam Abu Salam crossing for the 27th day in a row. Thousands of trucks have been denied entry to the coastal enclave, which means the goods they are carrying are threatened with damage and loss. And we've seen Israel do that before, where there'll be humanitarian aid, and Israel will just leave it on the docks until it's rotted and unusable, and then they'll send it through the gate and say, see, we delivered the humanitarian aid. So it's basically shutting down. Israel is pursuing a policy of collective punishment against the Gaza Strip, which, by the way, is considered a war crime, crime against humanity. Article coming out of Mondoweiss is saying, we need a communal response to Israeli government and Canary mission attacks on Palestine's advocates. And it's talking about how the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs and its right-wing non-governmental organization allies are trying to silence, marginalize, and destroy the job and earnings prospects of young Americans on college campuses who dare to advocate for Palestinian rights. Now that's pretty underhanded, heavy-handed kind of tactics. Not just, argue the merits of the case with them, but to literally take active steps to destroy their potential careers. And I went through that myself all the way back with the Vince Foster case. All right, let's take a phone call from Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome back to the show. And what's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. Before I respond to Joe, who apparently called in yesterday and asked for my response to something, I'd like to just say that anything that Faith Goldie has to say should be taken with a grain of salt. I admire her. The woman has a hell of a lot of guts. However, she is a rabid Zionist. And I remember when she was in Bethlehem, she stood there claiming that Christians had abandoned Bethlehem and they should have a new crusade. First of all, Christians didn't abandon it. Christians went in pursuit of a livelihood because Israel was strangulating the economy for both Muslims and Christians who have a sense of loyalty to one another, because when you suffer together, you kind of stay together. But again, I don't mean to mean everything about Faith Goldie. A lot of her work is good. Now, on to the issue of what Joe said yesterday. He issued a call. Would I comment on the idea of the Arab street? First of all, the idea of the Arab street is not really relevant with regard to Arabs, because they don't walk around the streets like we do, protesting or dialoguing. I shouldn't be watching you on the air because you're talking while I'm speaking, but, and I don't know if you're talking to me, but
there's a bit of a delay in the YouTube. There's a delay, so just stop looking at my face.
That's why the video. I'll take my eyes off the monitor. Palestinians and Arabs, like all other people, are normal and will not stick their necks out in what they believe is a lost cause. Everybody knows that Israel has an arsenal of nuclear weapons, and they probably will find themselves a safe place to hide before they detonate and kill everybody else. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they have found some kind of weapon that will destroy human life but leave the infrastructure intact.
Yeah, it's called a neutron bomb.
Okay, I didn't know, but that certainly, I'd read something about it. I didn't know the details. Secondly, cousins, brothers, lovers fight with one another and won't defend one another if it's going to require that they put themselves at risk. And there are certainly,
Layla, we have to take a short break for commercials. Do not hang up the phone. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as has become quite evident over the last couple of weeks, there really is a war against the independent media. And we need your help. And there's no such thing as too small of a donation. So the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call in with a credit or debit card donation or to pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during normal business hours, extension 3 at all other times. So getting on back to the phones and getting on back to Layla and the so-called Arab Street, can you just sort of pick up where you left off?
Yes, but before I continue with why I think the rest of the Arab world is not jumping up and down and complaining about Israel, I'd like to make a comment about donations to your show. If it were not for your show, Michael, I don't know what I would do, because I do not have cable TV. I cannot trust any of the other so-called media. So I today, as I want you to be aware of this, I'll send you the tracking number. I'm going to be sending you 9 checks to cover until the end of January, and I'll send you the tracking number because I think it's really urgent that someone like you stays on the air. As much as I liked Alex Jones during the campaign, I think Alex went off the rails. Alex Jones went off the rails after Trump turned out to be such a disappointment and such an embarrassment to Alex Jones. And I wish Alex Jones the best of luck, because he was one of the precursors in all of this independent media. The other thing I will issue to you, and this is a promise, the city I'm living in is supposed to be a sanctuary city. So even if you're a criminal, if you have to leave Hawaii, you and Claire will be welcome here. You'll have a place in my home until you can get settled. Maybe Canada will be easier. I don't know. We're basically at the mercy of the U.S., but that's also an open invitation to you and Claire. Now I'll continue. I've always believed, as I watched the so-called Arab Spring unfold, I knew that there must be instigators amongst them. Jewish Arabs are literally indistinguishable from non-Jewish Arab-speaking people because they're basically all from the same genetic stock. Israel has used many of them. When I mentioned that I used to work for the Institute for Palestine Studies in Beirut, one of the things that I worked on was a report that was being presented to the Human Rights Commission. Within that report, I read all about the horrendous means of torture and the abuses that people were put through, which is another reason why I decided to back away from any kind of public resistance to Israel. So there are a lot of reasons why even the most courageous people living in the Middle East will not get involved. If someone like me did not want to take up the fight, who was born there, whose ancestry goes back for thousands of years, and if I did, and I have Canada as an escape hatch, why would anybody in the Arab world want to jeopardize themselves, their families, their children? There's way too much that would be at risk. In fact, what I would ask is, where are the people in North America who are not speaking out? Where are the Jews who know that they have been used and they have been played by Zionism, that this Holocaust was intended to instill in them the agonies and the memories, the false memories perhaps, of the torment that Jews presumably endured during the Holocaust. So that is really where the strength lies. It lies amongst the people in North America, and it lies primarily in the hands of North American Jews, who are going to be the ones who will ultimately be blamed if Israel causes a world war and people are angry and infuriated for the ramifications it will have on them. I think I've said enough, Mike. I'll turn back over to you and your other callers.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and thank you for the kind words about donations and for the kind offer of sanctuary. We've actually been offered places to go by a great many people, should it come to that. But at this point, we're going to stay and keep the fight going as long as we possibly can. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Turning now to South Africa, the ruling party down there is now calling all white people murderers. And they've already got a list of 198 farms that are about to be taken without compensation. And a lot of people are saying that South Africa literally hovers on the brink of anarchy with all the anger that's in the street here. And if you look at what's going on in this country, where they're now out there normalizing the idea that all white people are racists, which is nonsense. But we seem to be heading in the same direction, and it's very, very alarming. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I was looking at Fox News. I've been looking at it off and on all morning, and they're just like totally focused on the possibility of a direct question and answer session between Robert Mueller and Donald Trump. And they're basically telegraphing. Mueller is trying to find something he can construe as obstruction of justice. Now, what does this have to do with the Russian collusion story? Which is absolutely nothing. And Mueller is basically playing to the masses. Whatever they're getting ready to try and do to Donald Trump, Mueller is out there to try and sell the American people that this is all legit. It's on the up and up. It's the way the system is supposed to work. Meanwhile, of course, the real Russian collusion, as Donald Trump keeps saying, was over at the Clinton camp when they paid for that Christopher Steele dossier, which supposedly used Russian sources. They paid for that. And then there's the Uranium One deal. Nobody's looking at that. All right, let's go to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Please stop watching Fox News.
Well, it's you know, there's nothing else to watch. I'm not going to watch, you know, CNN.
You can watch your walls dry if you just painted them.
Well, we can do that, but I need to have a feel for what they're lying to us about today.
They're so wretched, Fox News. I used to watch them until the Iraq War, and I said, when they had the guy on who was Saddam's bomb maker, and they all disappear after the war starts, right? Well, what a fraud channel, just like CNN. They're all crap. You got to do your own research,
gone downhill.
You know?
Fox has gone downhill. There's no question. They're being brought into the fold.
Mike, do you find it a coincidence that the white farmers are getting killed, kill whitey in South Africa, and the same thing is going on here, and in Europe, kill the white man? Like, I mean, there ain't no coincidence going on here.
No, it doesn't feel like it's a coincidence. You know, it feels like it's part of this whole New World Order thing that's going on.
And you know what's amazing? Where's Black Lives Matter? What's going on in Chicago? Where's Black Lives Matter when Obama killed how many brown people droning them, or just wars, you know, and with Hillary and stuff? Where are these groups at? Not a peep.
No, they're only upset when it's a white police officer and a black suspect. Then they get involved.
And let me tell you, Mike, these people are true global Marxists. I mean, they're all going to take us to the cornfield eventually, because that's what's going on here. I mean, eventually. You can feel, Mike, you can feel it, how angry these people are. Just look at the protests in Portland. I mean, they're just angry at Trump. The guy's only been in for, where were these people for the last, 20 years?
Well, I think overall, Americans are getting angry. And I think all of this Black Lives Matter and whites are racist and everything is an attempt by the government and the corporate media that we direct our anger at each other instead of at the government and corporate media that have basically lied us into this horrible mess.
Standard operating procedure, divide and conquer, like it's been going on since the history. Yeah, divert from the government causing all the problems and blame each other. You know, but I mean, I never seen anything like it. I mean, you can't even wear a Trump shirt outside or a bumper sticker on your car or a hat that says, "Make America Great Again." They even going after people who wear the American flag on their shirts.
Yeah.
You know, you hear the Antifa people saying, "America sucks." You know, I'm like, well, then move. You know, and then they go home, right? You know, after they say America sucks, then they go home or they go out to a movie. Yeah, they're such a fraud group. But I'm telling you, Mike, I really do think that these people are as dangerous as, any gang out there. I mean, these people have the potential to just shank you in the back. That's what it's coming down to. You know,
they could basically, start a civil war.
I think we're already in one. it's just like a soft one, kind of like a soft Cold War, or we're in a Cold War. I mean, all this stuff going on at the same time is not good for this country, because basically, Mike, you know, we said it before, and I said it, and you said it, we are in the decline. We are, the unipolar world of ours is ending.
Yes.
And the multipolar world's coming up, and I think the government's just going to try to pull out all the stops, you know, when it comes to trying to stop it from happening, you know. And good luck with that, you know. But I think it's too late for the multipolar world to be stopped at this point, because there's too much sanctions being put on everybody, and everybody's just going to be going their own way and making their own deals together. And it seems like the U.S. and Britain are probably be left.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
A couple other, yeah. And all right, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, North Korea has issued another statement saying that they're demonstrating good faith. They ended the nuclear weapons testing. They handed over the remains of the U.S. troops killed in the Korean War. They dismantled that missile test stand, and they are denying the allegations made in this UN report saying that they're building more missiles and building more nukes. They're saying it's a complete lie. And they're saying it's time for the United States to make a gesture of good faith. And the two that keep coming up are, of course, dropping the sanctions and officially ending the Korean War. Unfortunately, Mike Pompeo's attitude is that North Korea has to give the U.S. everything the U.S. wants first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. So, now, over in Russia, Rosatom, which is their nuclear technology sector, said they have developed and successfully tested what is being called a perpetual reactor. And this is a reactor capable of powering Russia's newest nuclear submarines during their entire lifetime without having to be refueled, which is a major, major task, whether it's for a submarine or an aircraft carrier. I mean, you're going to be dry docked for a long time while that reactor gets refueled. This one never will. The new nuclear reactor will be able to run during the whole life cycle of the next generation submarine. And it said the company upgraded and tested a newer design of the so-called active zone. This is the heart of every reactor where the fission is actually taking place, allowing it to generate more power than its predecessors. So their submarines are not going to have that downtime for a refuel. Meanwhile, China has successfully tested its hypersonic Starry Sky 2 aircraft that is able to fire nuclear missiles that travel at 4,563 miles per hour to evade existing anti-missile defense systems. That is very, very fast. And again, the military-industrial complex has, for the most part, been rebuilding the weapons that won World War II. And Russia and China have been thinking very much outside the box. And it looks to me like they're way ahead of the U.S. on the hypersonic technology, and the U.S. is playing catch-up here. Apparently, a U.S. judge has ruled against the Trump policy restricting transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. This is the second court in the country to rule against the government since it announced the policy last March. Now, I think, you know, issues of political correctness aside, somebody over at the Pentagon ought to be doing a study to see how is this going to impact the morale of the combat units, because morale is very important to a combat unit's fighting efficiency. They have to be relaxed. They have to feel comfortable with their fellow soldiers or sailors. I think this is going to cause more problems. It'll keep the PC people happy, but I think it's not a good idea here. Anyway, article out of Zero Hedge, and basically talking about how the reality is that U.S. and British neocolonialism is starting to come down. And the project by the U.S. started with Reagan, backed by British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in 1981. And for 20 years, it seemed to sweep all before it. But the world is now changing. We're seeing the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The world is learning to operate around us. And if you've been following the wars lately, they're not going well. They're turning into spectacular failures, like Syria, and we're still stuck in Afghanistan, we're still stuck in Iraq, we're still stuck in Libya. It's not going well. They're not going to be able to complete that project. Unfortunately, Washington, D.C. is caught up in this groupthink where they're out there saying, yes, we're unbeatable, we've never lost a war. Well, you lost in Vietnam, and you pretty much lost in Syria as well. Our stockpiles are exhausted, our war machinery is worn out, the new stuff coming out of the military-industrial complex is overpriced junk. We have to basically try and get somebody inside the power structure to open their eyes and see they're looking at national suicide. Now, turning to domestic politics, apparently Mueller was able to find a lever to use on Rick Gates, and Rick Gates is now basically testifying several other crimes to Robert Mueller's special counsel, beyond those his old boss is charged with. And this is, of course, the Manafort case. And Gates has revealed that the Mueller probe had said it would not oppose him if he applied for probation for the two crimes he pled guilty to in February: conspiracy against the United States and obstructing justice by lying to FBI agents. So that's Mueller's plan, to basically find something that you could throw somebody into jail for and then say, we'll get you a get-out-of-jail-free card if you will roll on the president. And that brings us to Michael Cohen, who apparently they're looking at his association with Sterling National Bank, which provided financing for Mr. Cohen's taxi medallion business. And they're basically looking at committing fraud. He inflated the value of his assets as collateral for loans. Now, convictions for bank fraud can carry potentially significant prison sentences. So now Mueller's got a lever that he can use on Michael Cohen and turn him against the president. Get him to lie. So this is getting really, really ugly. Anyway. Now, despite objections from the Department of Justice, a federal court has ordered the Justice Department to preserve James Comey's personal emails. And it's turned out that he, like Hillary Clinton, was using a private email account to conduct official business while he was director of the FBI. Now, why would Hillary and Comey use a private email server? In his case, it's a Gmail account, so that no copies were being kept in accordance with federal records preservation acts. That's why they were doing it. And Judicial Watch and the Daily Caller News Foundation, they're just having to struggle through the court system. Now, speaking of Judicial Watch has been a thorn in the side of many presidents going all the way back to Bill Clinton. But obviously in Donald Trump is very pleased with Judicial Watch because they're trying to hold the deep state accountable. Now, I've followed Judicial Watch for a long time. I knew one of the lawyers who used to work for them, and they're nonpartisan. They don't have an axe to grind. There is no bias there. If they see corruption, they're going after it. That's what they're trying to do. And again, as I mentioned a little earlier in the show, Trump is announcing the Russian collusion is 100% real, but it all came from the Clinton camp. And basically, you have Hillary and the Democratic National Party used a law firm to launder money that went to this foreign national, Christopher Steele, to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. And he came up with that now discredited dossier, which apparently was sourced from Russian sources. So there's Russian collusion right there. And Hillary paid money for this. and they're just after Donald Trump here. Okay, now Robert Mueller also has this criminal case against Russians accused of interfering in the 2016 election. And Mueller issued the indictments and figured that would be the end of it. It would hit the newspapers, Russian collusion. And the Russians actually sent lawyers to defend themselves. And Mueller has been trying to prevent discovery so that the defense lawyers don't realize there never really was a case. Well, now the U.S. judge overseeing this criminal case agreed to appoint an independent lawyer to review pretrial evidence for possible national security issues before giving it to the defense lawyers. And they're basically saying this is a firewall, cancel. This is just a tactic to block discovery by the defense lawyers. Oh, we can't show you that. National security implications. Oh, we can't show you that either. National security implications. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Joe in Glendale, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, I'm a little confused. Trump, a few weeks ago, threatened to shut down the government if he didn't get the funds for this border wall.
Yes.
Now, the last time I checked, the GOP had control of both houses.
Yes.
So it's all theater, Mike. If the GOP, with both majorities in the House and the Senate, can't unify behind a Republican president to reform this immigration system, you're never going to have any reform, because they're in the pockets of the corporations that want cheap labor, an endless supply of cheap labor, and the Democrats just want, as you've been saying all along, permanent power through the influx of lazy, poor voters who will be dependent on government. So
Yep.
you're never, with that a reality, you're never going to have a solution.
No, we're headed for a collapse.
Until the system collapses, like
Yeah.
you said. Right.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, I just wanted to say this. I don't know what this GOP Congress is going to run on, because what have they accomplished? They've enacted a tax cut that benefits primarily the wealthy and corporations. They've earmarked more money and agreed more arms to their masters in Tel Aviv. They've advanced a bellicose foreign policy that has included sending Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, and making it more difficult for Trump to improve ties with Russia.
Okay.
I mean, what kind of
Joe, I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Joe in Glendale. And Joe, what the GOP has to run on in the midterms is that they're not Democrats. Because right now the Democrats have got a major, major image problem coming out of the 2016 elections and their aftermath and the continuing violence across the country. And it's left a bad taste in the mouths of the American people. And I've seen quite a few articles out there saying that that's the biggest problem the Democrats face, is their image. People know that the Democrats are behind this push for open borders and for illegal immigrants. And so that's what the GOP has to run on. Vote for me. I'm not a Democrat.
But the GOP hasn't addressed this open borders problem. They have a president. They have Donald Trump in the White House who wants to deal with this issue, and yet they want to just keep shoveling money to Israel and the military-industrial complex.
Okay, you just changed context right in the middle of the sentence here. We're talking about the illegal immigration. You need to put the blame where the blame belongs, and that's in the court system, which is, opposing
Right.
Donald Trump every step of the way. And Congress doesn't need to fix the immigration system. We have Title VIII.
Right.
If it was just being enforced, the problem would be solved. But unfortunately, we have members of Congress, including Hawaii's own Mazie Hirono, who don't even know the law. And she got caught off guard when she was told that actually it is already a crime for somebody to walk across our border without official paperwork.
Well, that's why I said the whole system is rigged, because even the court system doesn't know the laws, it seems. They strike down these decisions made by Trump that are completely legitimate, and yet they strike them down.
Yeah, I know. The problem is the entire system is corrupt, is what it comes down to. And everybody's out there trying to do what they think is going to make them richer and more powerful. And sadly, nobody is looking into the future and see that we're headed to a crisis that this nation will not survive. And it's going to be a combination of economic, the corruption will spill over from the central government. We're seeing violence in the streets. But again, getting back to your point, there may be a serious pushback against Democrats as we get closer to November, because the Democrats are not doing anything to fix their image except waving around this open borders lady.
No, but I heard Pat Buchanan on a Tom Woods podcast say that he believes the Democrats are going to do quite good in the midterms, perhaps take back the House, maybe not the Senate. But he said maybe that might not be too bad because perhaps the Democrats will overreach if they have control of the House, and that will bite them in the you know what in 2020. Who knows?
Well, I don't think so, and I disagree with Pat Buchanan, but of course there is that issue of election fraud, which nobody's really done anything about it, except tighten the cords on the election machines. Nobody's doing anything about illegal immigrants voting, and they vote Democratic.
Right.
If the Democrats take the House, then they'll gain control of all these committees who've been looking into all this corruption, and that'll be the end of the investigations. They'll just be shut right down.
Yeah.
Anyway, got to let you go, Joe. Got to do station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, out in California, Dianne Feinstein is dealing with a little bit of an embarrassment. It's basically come on out that she employed a Chinese spy for 20 years. And apparently, while this was going on, her husband was raking in millions in Chinese business. So the Daily Caller reported the name of the spy is Russell Lowe. Russell Lowe was Senator Feinstein's office manager. And Feinstein and her third husband, Richard Blum, have made millions off of their financial interests in China. Now, apparently, Dianne Feinstein was warned about possible Chinese bribes and infiltration in the 1990s. And the San Francisco Chronicle is reporting none of her staff even knew what was going on, just kept the story quiet. So supposedly Feinstein found out for herself her staffer was a Chinese spy in 2013 when she was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So think about that. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee had a Chinese spy working for her for 20 years. Now, Feinstein is saying that when she found out the facts 5 years ago, she fired the employee. Feinstein tweeted over the weekend that the FBI approached her 5 years ago with concerns about this staffer in her San Francisco office, and she said she learned the facts and made the employee leave the office immediately, which is very good for her to do. But here is my question. Why didn't the FBI give the same courtesy to Donald Trump? Why didn't they go to him and say, we think there may be a Russian agent in your campaign? And Trump has already said, had they done so, he would have fired him. They didn't. The FBI left that agent in place and did not inform the Trump campaign. Why is it one set of rules for Dianne Feinstein and another set for Donald Trump? Because the FBI wanted to set Trump up for a collusion charge? Maybe. Now, this next story is going to be, it's weird, and it shows just how broken our society and civility has become. Over at the University of Georgia, there's a professor, Charles N. Davis. He's the dean of the University of Georgia's College of Journalism and Mass Communication. His childhood friend is Brian Kemp, Georgia's Secretary of State, who won the state's GOP gubernatorial primary election on July 24th of this year. So far, so good. So that night, Charles Davis tweeted his congratulations to Kemp. And the tweet said, I went to high school with GOP Gov candidate Brian Kemp. We played YMCA ball from childhood. Politics be darned. He is a nice guy, always was, kind to a fault. He's a friend, always has been, and will be when we're older and grayer. That's how it should all work. And Davis' tweet just triggered this huge backlash from the easily triggered. And one tweeter wrote, "You're a straight white man. Of course he was nice and kind to you. Racists are generally nice to their own kind. Why don't you say what you really mean? Politics be darned. You'd never vote for a black woman and would much rather vote for a white racist." And then another tweeter wrote, "It's the definition of privilege. The dean has the luxury of darning politics because no politician is threatening his rights, safety, or survival. He's willing to empower those who would threaten the same of others on account of the candidates being nice to him personally." And at that point, Davis basically apologized. He was forced to apologize for congratulating his friend on winning the election. That's all he did. And the easily triggered just went after him. And ultimately, he took the tweets down. That's how unhinged civil discourse has become in this country. Okay. Now, article out of Front Page Mag is talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center, which recently was exposed for having links to the FBI. And the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has nothing to do with law or poverty, is out there promoting this big lie that all conservative Americans are racists and the real threat to the nation rather than Islamic terrorists. Southern Poverty Law Center claims the principal enemies of the American people are presumptive Republican, well, actually, this is an older article, Donald Trump, David Horowitz, and the Tea Party movement. It's an attack machine. Now, over in West Hollywood, the city council voted unanimously to remove Donald Trump's star from the Hollywood Walk of Fame because of the president's disturbing treatment of women. They just went on over there and just dug it on out of there. Odd that Kevin Spacey's star is still there, because right now, Scotland Yard is investigating 3 new sexual assault allegations against Spacey dating back as far as 1996. London police had earlier confirmed 3 other investigations against him, bringing the total to 6. But he still gets his star. Talk about petty, mean, and vindictive. It's things like this that actually make me glad I'm no longer involved in Hollywood. To see this kind of behavior, this childishness. Now, as you know, this Jiang affair, as they're starting to call it. Sarah Jiang got hired as an op-ed writer on tech matters for the New York Times, and there was this huge Twitter trail of racist, sexist tweets declaring white people should be canceled out or made to live underground like groveling goblins. And one tweet she said, "Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old white men." So Jim Kunstler is out there saying that this is peak social justice warrior bovine excrement. And when this blog stuff hit the internet, the Times Human Resources Department tried to deal with it by saying that Ms. Jiang was merely mirroring or counter-trolling malicious tweets she'd received over the years, imitating the rhetoric of her harassers. Well, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And now, of course, the New York Times is embarrassed because more tweets were discovered of Sarah dissing the New York Times and virtually all of its other op-ed writers in vile terms. So, now, interestingly enough, Sarah Jiang's overt anti-white racism doesn't seem to be a concern for the New York Times. Meanwhile, at Business Insider, Danielle Greenbaum had an article removed simply for defending Scarlett Johansson's casting as a transgender role in a movie. There's a clear double standard in censorship. We censor what we don't like. That's it. It's done case by case. We don't like it, it's gone. We don't like Alex Jones, he's off of our site. It's completely arbitrary. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. John in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. On the topic of censorship you know, about the real good working relation that Google has with China.
Yes.
Going on basically right now. And that's probably why you see the effects of what you see with Alex Jones, because you got to understand everything that happens in China is a petri dish for the rest of the nation around the world. You know, that's why Israel is merging their technology with Chinese productivity.
Well, yeah, and because the Chinese are productive. But I'm very much aware that Google has agreed to censor their search engine to allow the government to decide what people can find and what they can't find, which basically undermines its value as a search engine, unless you're just into finding cute kitten videos or something like that. Johnny, you there? Okay, I guess we lost him. All right, now, and of course, if Google is willing to censor for the Chinese government, it certainly looks like they're willing to censor for the U.S. government. Now, there's a new poll that's out, and it was conducted by Ipsos, and the poll says 43% of Republicans want to give Trump the power to shut down media. And in this case, it means the corporate media. And as bad as the corporate media has been, as much as they lie to us, I have a problem with this. I think the ultimate decision as to what media should survive and what media should go away should be left up to the American people with that little channel changing button. Stop watching the media that lies to you. Start watching the media that tells you the truth. And that will do it. I don't like this at all. I don't think it's a good idea. Now, basically, getting on back to some of the stuff that happened at the Bundy Ranch thing, even the FBI is starting to agree that when undercover agents pose as journalists, it hurts real journalists' works. And this is not the first time we've heard this. Now, right now, the FBI is attempting to fend off litigation from Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, which is filing requests for documents under the Freedom of Information Act. But we've heard these complaints before from journalists who are very concerned about how the FBI and the CIA, posing as journalists for cover, are engaged in espionage in other countries. And it can result in increasing hostility targeting journalists. So let's turn to the economic news because there is a lot going on. The European Union, France, Britain, and Germany have announced on Monday their commitment to protecting European companies doing legitimate business with Iran from future sanctions. And they issued this joint statement basically saying they regret the United States' withdrawal from the nuclear agreement with Iran and the activation of sanctions against it. And basically saying they're determined to protect EU companies conducting legitimate business with Iran under the laws of the EU and the UN Security Council resolution. And they're already activating blocking measures to basically protect their economies. So Europe is not going along with this thing. They're not going along with that. And of course, Trump is already out there saying that, you know, our allies risk severe consequences if they violate the Iran sanctions. Well, if you keep talking like that, Trump, they're not going to be allies much longer. Because that's where this is going. All these sanctions and all this economic warfare is isolating the United States politically and economically. All right. Apparently, John in Texas is back. Aloha, John. I understand there was some technical glitch. What else did you want to say?
Yes. What did you get? What did you stop? What did you hear me? Did you hear me with the Google and China? They're working together, and this it could be. That's why you see Alex Jones off. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I got all of that.
Okay. Then do you know about Israel's technology?
Yeah, we got that as well.
China's.
We got that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, do you know how? Do you know why they have that merging? You know how they're able to do that? and getting, that Bill Gates is building the biggest Microsoft plant over there in Israel, along with Intel.
Yes.
They already have their own.
Yeah, Israel's been buying up our high-tech sector for decades, and it's one of the reasons why young college kids don't have a job to go to that will allow them to repay those student loans.
And did you hear when I said that everything that's happening in China is a petri dish for the rest of the nations around the world, right?
Yes, I did.
Yes, so that's why you see this, because Google had this policy not to be evil. Remember they had that little policy thing? Like,
I think they took that down. I think they
took it down. They took it down to get into China.
Yeah.
To make a separate browser for their own people, and this is the petri dish for us. You know what I'm saying?
I think you've got it backward. I mean, we're learning right now that Google has been censoring and filtering and down counting search results for quite a while now, and I think all Google did was take those same algorithms to China.
Did you know how it works in China? Like, say if you would have typed in something that wasn't allowed, it would send you either to a false thing, and not only it sends you a false thing, it would freeze your computer for a certain length of time, and then it would siphon information and stuff like that. That's what they were using the first Google. Okay,
I have a little trouble. I have a little trouble with that one. I mean, the simplest way for Google to do this is to simply not show search results that are banned by the government. And so if you start harassing the computer users, they're going to know something's going on. And the only way this is really going to work...
Oh, yeah, but this is China, though. This is China. This is what they do in China.
John, let me finish. The only way this really works effectively is for the people using the search engine to not know the results are being filtered. And for the longest time, that was true here in the United States. It's only recently that we've come to find out that social media is engaged in filtering and censoring, especially of conservatives. Anyway, John, got to let you go. Got to get back to the news here. Now, down in Israel, their public security minister, Gilad Erdan, basically called the European Union morally bankrupt for snubbing the United States and its sanctions on Iran. And he basically came on out and said the EU is morally bankrupt, and we need to remember that next time they try and lecture us. Boy, talk about pot, kettle, and black. Morally bankrupt? Why don't you take a look down at that Gaza fence? Now, the petro-yuan futures surge limit up to record high as the U.S. sanctions hit Iran. Now, limit up is a term where it went up to maximum allowable. There are artificial limits on these equities markets. They're not allowed to go too high or too low. So apparently the petro-yuan is doing very well out of the sanctions here. Interestingly enough, as I already reported, China is going to buy oil from Iran. They're defying the U.S. sanctions, and they're suspending imports of oil from the United States. Apparently, a number of Chinese oil and gas companies are refusing to purchase U.S. oil. I don't think they saw that one coming. So, analysts are saying that the sanctions against Iran will likely hit Tehran's oil sales abroad and could lead to a price spike in oil contracts, meaning that you will pay a higher price at the gas pump because of this sanctions nonsense. All right, now then, we're going to take a phone call. Helen in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, good afternoon, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Oh, that's good. What's been on my mind? I had tried to get through to your station about all morning, and then I kind of got busy for a while. So I do want to give a couple comments. If the people in America would stop paying the FICA taxes that was on everybody's payroll checks for years. That money is not going to the United States of America. It's going to the Queen of England. And I pay for some of my friends in London.
You know, I've heard that story before, and I've seen absolutely nothing to support that claim. And
I'm not sure anymore. I don't do office work. I know I did work at the Altoona Employment Office.
You know, I mean, FICA stands for the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. And
yes,
there's a lot of crazy stuff that's being put onto the internet to try and make us look like we're being silly. And so this idea that the FICA withholding is going to the Queen of England, I have to put that in the category of being a hoax. Anyway, we're coming up on a commercial break here, so thank you for the phone call, Helen. We're going to let you go, and we will be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, John Bolton is out there doing what John Bolton does, screaming about North Korea is not doing what we're telling him to do, and basically saying the United States, apparently intentionally, is trying to crash the Iranian economy. So they've weaponized the sanctions. This is economic warfare, and the problem is economic wars can turn into real wars very, very quickly. Now, down in Venezuela, the U.S. has dropped their sanctions against oil. And they're doing it basically because it does look like Venezuela is about to collapse, and that the White House may not want to own the crisis because Venezuela is going to blame the sanctions for its downfall. And the U.S. has been waging economic warfare against Venezuela going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. And I find the timing of this dropping of the sanctions and the drone attack on the president somewhat more than just coincidental, I think. Now, as I was discussing with Francis there, a lot of countries go to China because it is a production economy. They're manufacturing powerhouse, and companies doing business there from the United States may find themselves in an uncomfortable situation. Apple is a big one. Apple has benefited from cheap labor and a strong supply chain in China, and they could find themselves as a bargaining chip in the trade war. Now, Apple made $9.6 billion in revenues in China in the June quarter, which helped Apple to hit a $1 trillion valuation. But this continuing trade war could easily reverse that. And American companies doing business in China could find themselves caught between a rock and a hard place, so to speak here. Now, former Iranian President Ahmadinejad is saying that the dollar is one of the major pillars of U.S. dominance over global finance and trade. He's absolutely right. Going all the way back to Bretton Woods. That's what Bretton Woods was all about. The world will come to the United States for the U.S. dollar. And Ahmadinejad is calling for change in the current world order. And he says things need to change. Current orders should be reordered. And this, I think, is an illustration of what I was saying the other day. The rest of the world is going to learn how to get along without the United States. And the global economy is reshaping itself, and there's going to be a big dark hole in the middle where the United States and the US dollar used to be. That's where this is going to be headed. Unfortunately, Washington, D.C. policymakers seem to still be living under the illusion that the United States is indispensable to the rest of the world, and that the world will continue to come to the U.S. and the U.S. dollar because they have no other choice. Well, they do have choices. Doing business directly with each other in their own native currencies, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and there are going to be new ones coming on board. Now, Goldman Sachs has angered the Turkish government. They came on out with a statement saying that Turkish banks will be wiped out if the Turkish lira hits 7.1. And that prompted a response from the Turkish government saying that, no, that's an entirely baseless lie. And Our embassy in Turkey said, despite current tensions, the United States continues to be a solid friend and ally of Turkey. They have a very strange way of demonstrating that, I might add here. We were talking the other day about the sudden surge in bankruptcies for elderly people, aka the baby boomers. And this article in Zero Hedge basically reinforces that. An alarming number of older Americans are being forced into bankruptcy as the rate of people 65 and older who have filed has never been higher. It's 3 times higher than it was in 1991. And the rate of bankruptcies among Americans aged 65 and older has more than doubled. This is according to a study from the Bankruptcy Project. And basically what it is declining pension payments, increasing cost of food and housing, not to mention the out-of-pocket spending for medical care because of Obamacare. So the baby boomer generation, which was born into prosperity, they're having their wealth sucked out completely. And the wealth inequality in this country is really out of control. America's 1% haven't controlled this much of the nation's wealth since before the Great Depression of the 1930s. And we know what happened at that point. It all came crashing down. The wealth has to circulate throughout the entire society at all levels, freely, and into all necessary sectors of development. When it's all being piled up at the very top, the economy starts to stutter, which is what's happening with things like retail Mageddon. All right, we have another commercial break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Speaking of search engines, there are a lot of people these days searching the phrase, is Tesla going bankrupt? And apparently the search trend is really surging at this particular point. And interestingly enough, though, Saudi Arabia is pumping $2 billion into Tesla. And that prompted Elon Musk to issue a statement that they're going to take Tesla private. Now, the current investors can remain the current investors, or they can basically sell out at this point. But the stock is no longer going to be publicly offered, and in point of fact, trading has already been halted. And a lot of people are saying this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Over at Bloomberg, Sebastian Boyd is saying the math just does not work on out. Tesla has a free float of 127.5 million shares at $420 a share, which is what it's currently trading at the close, would cost you $53.6 billion to buy those shares back. Now, the company already has a net debt of $8 billion, almost $9 billion, and an adjusted net leverage ratio of 13 times. Were it to be bought in a management-led leveraged buyout, a back of the envelope calculation gives you a leverage ratio of over 90 times worse on a trailing 12-month basis. You can't run a company like that. So, interesting things going on over at Tesla. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Nathan in Northern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Michael. Thank you very much for taking my call. It's a little bit off topic, and I'll make it real brief, but this is really bugging me, so I wanted to get your opinion. This guy, Cody Snodgrass, you might have heard his name mentioned. His book with somebody from the military approaching him to blow up the federal building in Oklahoma City, and he turned it down. Well, I listened to a few of his interviews with Ole Damagard and John B. Wells, and he claimed at one point that he had a friend that was shot up in the Gulf of Tonkin and severely injured. And as we all know, the Gulf of Tonkin never happened. And so that got me...
Hang on. Okay, there had been previous exchange of hostilities in that area, and so there may have been people who were actually injured, not in the Gulf of Tonkin incident that Johnson used to ignite the war, but there had been some tensions and collisions. So, but as far as Mr. Snodgrass making the claim that he was approached about blowing up the building, my first question is, why is he still alive? Because having been offered that job and turning it down makes him a live liability.
Well, exactly. I wholeheartedly agree. He also claims that back in the 1980s that he could go over to Saudi Arabia on these black ops assignments or whatever he's talking about, and he can make $50,000 a month doing bodyguard work for the royal family. This is like for their sons and nephews or whatever. So I called a Florida company that does bodyguard work, and they also do training.
Yep.
And I asked the lady who sounded like the wife of the owner. She's the office manager, and I said $50,000 a month back in the 1980s. And she said, well, we've actually done work in Saudi Arabia, and the royal family is very generous, but $50,000 a month back in the 1980s might have been possible, but she felt it was highly unlikely.
Yeah.
So that was her 2 cents. And the research I've done, you know, if you're a real top-notch bodyguard, you know, you're usually ex-Secret Service, ex-Special Forces, and you speak a second language like Arabic. And these guys make $700 a day, or maybe up to $180,000 a year. Now, 30 years ago, $50,000 a year as a bodyguard for the royal family, it just sounds preposterous. Absolutely. This sounds like one of Don Shipley's type of projects. You know, the guy who exposes phony Navy SEALs, you know, people that claim to have been a Navy SEAL, and when he looks up their records, you know, it's ridiculous. So I just wondered, for my own amazement, my last little question for you is, has Cody ever tried to get on your show?
No.
Okay, good. Well, if he ever does, I would ask him the meanest, nastiest, rottenest questions you can think of, and go from there as far as your gut feeling is concerned. But this bodyguard company in Florida, you know, the lady was like, "Who is this guy?" And I said, "You can catch his interviews on YouTube." But it's amazing, if I'm correct, that he is not what he says he is that there are people out there trying to take advantage of other people to make a buck, and it's really kind of sad.
Yeah, it really is. You know, they ought to change USA to AFAB, anything for a buck. And, you know, the love of money is the root of all evil. And, yeah, there are people without any ethics who, you know, they pull off hoaxes, whether they're financial like Bernie Madoff did, or hate crime hoaxes like Tawana Brawley, just to get their names in the newspaper. There are people who for some reason, there's something lacking in their upbringing where they think this is acceptable behavior. Anyway, Nathan, thank you very much for the warning and the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, getting on back to the economic news here. The city of West Covina in Southern California just fired 21 blue-collar workers to prop up their pension system. They were trying to balance the budget, and because of their pension obligations, they wound up having to cut 21 people from the maintenance department. Now, this is kind of personal for me because when I was in high school, I lived in West Covina, and back then it was a very lovely city. And we're seeing this all across the country, where city budgets are being cut, are being balanced by cutting the maintenance workers. And these are the workers who are like cleaning up the mess after the homeless people. And apparently in West Covina, homelessness has gone up by 600% in the last 3 years. And it was this maintenance crew who dealt with the debris, to use the polite word. And basically, the city residents are outraged. They like living in a clean city. And now it's just not going to happen unless they get out there and do it themselves. So turning to the world of immigration and refugees here, apparently over in Europe, there's this migrant, Aras Bako. He's a Syrian refugee currently living in Austria and wrote an open letter published in the daily newspaper OE24 saying that ordinary Austrians and Germans should participate in the integration process of migrants by opening up their homes to them and giving them money. So that's the latest spin on the refugee crisis. You know, just let us live in your homes, give us money. That will help us integrate into Europe. Amazing. Now, the reality is, according to this article out of Investment Watch blog, globalism is being rejected across the continent. The people are growing tired of this social engineering experiment. The nationalist, populist candidates are starting to win elections. And I imagine George Soros is rather upset by that. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, yet another judge has blocked the Trump administration from ending the Obama Immigrants First DACA. And what is starting to emerge here is a government that doesn't really seem to know who's in charge. And Trump is the president. I don't care how disappointed you are in him. He's the president. And I don't think judges outrank him. Now, getting on back to that whole wall issue and why is it not being built here, apparently there's a government study saying the wall is basically bovine excrement. You know, Trump campaigned on the wall, promised Mexico would pay for it. And there's actually been no real progress. I mean, they set up some test panels, and that was it. But apparently Customs and Border Protection did not research a few minor details when proposing costs for the wall, like what the terrain is like, and what parts of the border need to be blocked to stop migrants from crossing, and who actually owns the land the wall would be built on. And according to this new report, these oversights could be a problem. And again, I don't think you really need a wall. You just need to enforce Title VIII. The laws are already on the books. Illegal immigrants can go to jail or be immediately deported coming across the border. Anybody giving aid, housing, transportation, support, or jobs to illegal immigrants can go to jail. So the real question is not whether or not we should have the wall, but why are the existing immigration laws not being enforced? Eisenhower shut down illegal immigration when he was president. They called it Operation Wetback, which today would have the PC crowd just screaming all over the place. And he did it with only 1/10 of the resources of the current immigration customs enforcement. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Steve Elkins, aloha. Steve, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just to add what Nathan called about Cody Snodgrass, you know, he was on John's show about, I'm going to say 6 months ago, talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. He was contacted to, given the offer to do the bombing itself. He turned it down. And you make a very good point. Once you turn down a contract like that, your liability, they cut all, you know, they're going to cut you loose. They're going to take care of you, take you out. But I think he's about as phony as Rebecca Roth is on 9/11. She turned out to have a lot of baggage behind her that she couldn't answer some simple questions about 9/11 and her position, what she supposedly had with the airlines. But I don't know how far back it goes. I'd say 6 months ago, John had Snodgrass on his show for supposed to be a 2-day thing, a follow-up the following day, and he never returned his calls to come back on the second day, which could have been some theater there thrown in, like something happened to him, like somebody took him out. But I think he is a fraud. I think flat out he's a fraud. You make a very good point. Once you get a contract offer like that and you turn it down, they'll cut you loose, and your history. They're going to take you out because they can't take a chance on you, you know, opening your mouth and telling somebody else about it. So I think he's a fraud.
Yep. It does sound like it. I mean, you know, he's definitely one of these people. He wants to be greater than he actually is. And, you know, he wants to be famous. He wants to, you know, have book sales. And as I mentioned before, our society, our civilization, seems to have lost its moral compass, where people think this kind of thing is okay. Whether it's a student spray painting swastikas on her own dorm door so that she can scream anti-Semites, or Tawana Brawley screaming rape when it didn't actually happen. Back during the heyday of the 1990s militant feminism, rape became the second most falsely reported crime in America. And you have to wonder, what was missing in the upbringing of these women where they thought this was appropriate behavior? Of course, you had the feminists in the corporate media saying, yeah, it's perfectly okay. Catherine Comans, the assistant dean of student activity at Vassar, literally went on the record saying that a false rape charge was a good thing for a man to go through.
Amazing, amazing. That's it, Mike. I just wanted to point that out. He was on John's show, but didn't do a follow-up show, so I think he's a fraud.
Well, Steve, Mike is saying that he was a guest on the February 14th show of this year.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to Europe, it is looking more and more like there's going to be a hard Brexit. And basically, Trade Secretary Liam Fox told the Sunday Times newspaper that intransigence by EU officials is pushing towards no deal. And he estimates the chance of Britain simply crashing out of the EU without a deal at 60%. Personally, I think they'd be better off. Now, remember, Donald Trump said that he would sign a trade deal with Great Britain right after Brexit. And Britain and the EU are saying they're trying to hammer out an agreement on the divorce terms and future trade by October so it can be approved by all individual EU countries before the UK leaves the bloc on March 29th. But the talks have stalled. And the British government is trying to heap pressure on the other 27 EU nations to compromise by stressing the economic harm to all sides that would come from a no-deal Brexit that imposes tariffs and other barriers on UK-EU trade. So it's coming apart here. Now, let's go down back here to these Antifa terrorists. And that's not my word. That's the headline from teaparty.org. And apparently one of the things the Antifa rioters did in Berkeley is they smashed the windows of a U.S. Marine Corps recruiting office using hammers. And that, I think, is a little bit over the line here. And like I said, this is going to come back on the Democrats, who are associated with all of this nonsense here. Now, the Berkeley police arrested these 20 people, and they posted their mugshots on the Berkeley Police Department Twitter feed, which is something they normally do. But this time, several professors from UC Berkeley slammed the Berkeley Police Department, saying, "How dare you do that?" And again, they're trying to protect these guys. They're trying to protect these guys here. Apparently, the police confiscated dozens of weapons. This is really getting violence in the street. This is not just a case of rioters that knock over a trash can or something. We're talking some serious, serious vandalism here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hello, aloha to you both.
Well, I forgot to look at the clock before I picked up on the call here, so we're coming up on another commercial break. So I'm going to put you back on hold. And I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. So everybody stay tuned. We'll be back with Francis. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're on the phone with Francis in North Carolina. And aloha, Francis. What's on your mind today?
Well, you know, when you mentioned about, I really wasn't looking to call in to start with, but when you start talking about the illegal immigration and people coming in and not becoming a U.S. citizen and oh, well, reaping what was sowed or whatever, not sown or whatever, so forth ad nauseum. I'm reminded of the whole fiasco as being a three-ring circus at the cost of the everyday U.S. citizen, depending on what state they're a citizen of. You know how that works? For one thing, nothing's going to happen to them because, one thing, there's nothing going to happen to the corporations or companies that employ such an individual like that. Reason being is that they're going to have the ear and the pocket of the politician that's going to protect them to start with, which is the third ring of the circus, as the corporations or companies are the second ring of the three-ring circus. And so as a result, since they're all the whole trilogy of three-ring circus and acts all together, nothing is going to be done about it, because who's got whose ear, who's got whose pocket, and who's layering what, and then the person that comes in illegally ends up reaping from everything, because quite frankly, the person that that lives and resides here illegally is basically getting is paying out to get ripped off at a showboat of a three-ring circus that is not really a good show at all to be seen or be had, other than they've been had, for that matter. So with that, I'm out of here. Later.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And the phone lines are open. So getting on back to this Antifa violence, and 3 cities over the weekend, and going on back to the aftermath of the 2016 election, where it was just violence all over the place. And there was an article that came on out asking a very simple question: why are Democrats promoting violence against Republicans? And we've been seeing it, like Maxine Waters saying, you know, go confront them in the restaurants. And it's incitement. And basically, Democrats and the corporate media are going to continue to incite violence, and the violence will continue to escalate. Now, this article is implying that it's time to push back. I don't agree with that. I sort of agree with Gandhi: an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and soon the whole world is blind and toothless. But there is definitely an issue out there where the Democrats want this violence in the streets. And maybe that's what they're going to campaign on in November. You know, we'll bring order to the country. Forget about justice. We will establish order. Now, apparently, one of the 2 police officers who shot and killed Stephen Clark had his wedding crashed by Black Lives Matter protesters. Now, the Sacramento police have not released the names of the 2 officers who were involved in the incident back in March 18th due to safety concerns. So was there a leak inside the police department? Because apparently this small group of protesters got word about the wedding and made sure that they were there and crashed his wedding. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, here is a story that it's a gray area where you're not sure if it's a good idea or not. But according to the Herald Tribune, there is a proposal over in Sarasota about having a mental health disclosure of students who are enrolling in the public schools. And so this is part of the package of security measures passed by the Florida legislature in the wake of the shootings last February at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. And this provision requires parents or guardians registering a child for public school to disclose any mental health information in the prospective student's past. Okay? Sounds good. Having school officials made aware of a child dealing with mental health issues means the student and family can be connected to all available services, and school staff will be on alert to provide additional support or just keep an eye on potential troublemakers. Well, that part sounds really good, but there is a but. How do you do this without stigmatizing the child? And because of that, probably a lot of parents and guardians won't disclose anything. The other concern, of course, is how is this information going to be protected, as opposed to being hacked and leaked out and literally becoming an impediment to that student as they grow into adulthood. Now, over in Sweden, which is very liberal, very politically correct, talking about gender equality, and they've launched a brochure on transsexuality aimed at toddlers. And the book is about a horse that wants to be a dog and its owner, who's male, who wants to be a woman. And this sex education brochure is aimed at preschoolers called Horse and Master. And basically, it's a book about a horse and its owner. The horse thinks he might actually be a dog inside. And these kids are too young to really understand this stuff. They're not teaching them to accept transgenderism. They're trying to confuse them as to what gender they are. These kids are very young and very impressionable. They could be talked into thinking that they're something other than their biological gender. Just leave them alone, let them grow up, and they'll figure it out for themselves. Over at UCLA, they have hired 18 students at $13 per hour to combat social injustices and privilege and oppression. They've been recruiting over the last semester. This is hosted by the UCLA Intergroup Relations Program. The Diversity Peer Leaders Project is a year-long internship during which students facilitate workshops on social justice issues in exchange for leadership training and compensation from UCLA. Now, there is a lesson to be learned here coming out of the European witch hunts during the Middle Ages. Witch hunting was a very lucrative profession. The witch hunters, when they would find a witch, would usually share in whatever wealth was confiscated from the accused. And so, of course, because they were getting that financial inducement, they saw witches everywhere. And so this idea of paying students to look for social injustice, yeah, they're gonna see it everywhere, just like the witches. And again, how does any of this help these students find a high-paying job after graduation with which to repay those student loans? Boy, UCLA is a very different place from when I taught back there. Okay, so let's talk about Alex Jones and all this banning and everything that's going on. I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying that they hope that, you know, I won't be banned by Google and Facebook and Twitter and everything. Well, I don't use Facebook and Twitter, so I probably ought to just go ahead and delete those accounts anyway. So, interestingly enough, this banning actually proves Alex Jones' motto is correct. The motto of InfoWars is, there's a war on for your mind. And by blocking and deleting InfoWars accounts from their platforms, corporate media, corporate social media, has basically proved him right. They've proven they prefer the government-approved official narrative to free thinking and free will. Apparently, the new model is you don't get to decide what information you're exposed to or what to think. Big tech will do it for us. And that's dictatorship. It's like the old Soviet Union. Everything was Pravda and Izvestia, everybody else was silence. That's where we're heading. We're heading into actually, we're pretty much already there. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Now, over at YouTube, on the banned Alex Jones channel, and the account has been terminated, but in the official Alex Jones channel, it says this account's been terminated for violating YouTube's community guidelines. Now, right beside that is a bar, a related channels column. Traditionally, the way YouTube works is it fills up that column with videos you might be interested in seeing based on the video you're looking at right now. But YouTube has filled up that column with corporate media feed, pro-establishment channels. Now, not to be left behind, apparently the pornography site YouPorn has also banned Alex Jones and InfoWars videos and content. This is coming from BuzzFeed's Charlie Warzel. Mispronounced that here. I don't think Alex Jones will be too upset about that particular one. Meanwhile, out in Hollywood, the liberals are celebrating. And they took to Twitter saying, yes, this was a great thing that Apple, Facebook, and YouTube, they're purging Alex Jones. The purge is on here. And apparently, actress and former Netflix talk show host Chelsea Handler wrote, "Good news, YouTube, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify are all banning Alex Jones and InfoWars." So in Hollywood, apparently, the idea of the First Amendment, of freedom of expression, and civil discourse on the issues of the day is now verboten. This is the modern day equivalent of Nazi book burning is what's going on here today. And of course, the Twitter trolls are out there in force trying to shout down critics of Facebook and Google and YouTube by saying, well, they are private corporations and they have a right to do business with whoever they want or not. And mind you, these are the same people who went totally ballistic when a baker refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. So once again, no real consistency in policy, just we want what we want, what we want. Now, Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, is calling on other tech companies to ban more sites like InfoWars and says the survival of American democracy depends on it. Wrong. Democracy requires a discussion of the issues of the day so that the voters can democratically decide which direction they want the country to go. If you shut down everything but the official view, democracy is dead. So, now the blowback is already starting. Unicredit is the first major corporation to sever their ties with Facebook over ethics. And they basically say that Facebook hasn't acted ethically. And Bloomberg is saying other large companies may follow suit. And I would certainly encourage that. Now, Facebook, not happy with the mess they've already made, is denying claims it's after users' financial data after a report revealed Facebook has been asking U.S. banks to share information, including account balances and card transactions. I'm absolutely appalled at this. And apparently, Facebook wants to get into using its platform for online banking and online commerce. Sort of cutting into eBay's turf, as it were. Now, Mike Krieger is out there basically saying, stop complaining and just delete Facebook. Good suggestion. Everybody should be deleting their Facebook and Twitter accounts right now. And you should get your friends to do the same, because it isn't stopping with Alex Jones. Twitter has suspended the accounts of people like editorial director of antiwar.com Scott Horton, former State Department employee and author Peter Van Buren, and Dan McAdams, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Their Twitter accounts have all been shut off now. Apparently, Tommy Robinson has now been banned from Instagram. So, Facebook apparently blocked an ad by Elizabeth Heng, who's a GOP candidate for Congress. So they're not even trying to hide the bias. This is all about saturating the American people with, vote Democrat, vote Democrat, vote Democrat between now and November, and not allowing any conservatives to get on out there. But you know something? I think that may backflash, because people are turning away from these social media platforms, and they're using email. 99% of the communication I do is over email, and Google can't filter that yet. Now, Soros-backed Media Matters is now pushing on Facebook to eliminate anybody who questions the reality of human-caused global warming. Now, the global warming fanatics have been wrong on every one of their major predictions of devastation since 2008. Actually, it goes back further than that. In 2000, they were saying snowfalls were a thing of the past. So the American left has gone full fascist now, and that's a very, very troubling sign. We're becoming the evil we supposedly opposed in the rest of the world. Now, over at Project Veritas, James O'Keefe is calling on whistleblowers to expose the entire rotten tech machine. He's literally put on out the call that if there's somebody on the inside who's got information, to get in touch with Project Veritas, and they're going to go after him here. Now, the good news is InfoWars has an official app, and it surged in popularity Monday evening following the banning. It surpassed CNN. Now, Alex Jones' app was already beating the New York Times, ABC, BBC, Wall Street Journal, NPR, CNBC, CBS, USA Today, Reuters, Bloomberg, and MSNBC, Huffington Post, and even the Washington Post. And they bounded ahead of CNN on Tuesday evening. See, here's what's going on. The people who are reading sites like InfoWars and WhatReallyHappened.com, they already know where it is. They don't go searching for this stuff. I'm sure there's some young millennials who are looking for some of this stuff. But the millennials are going to be turning to these other search engines like DuckDuckGo and Yandex, which do not practice censorship. Okay. Mike Adams has come out with his opinion that these tech giant companies are guilty of criminal racketeering and fraud. He's saying the RICO Act clearly applies here because there is a conspiracy to silence America, mostly to silence conservative America. All right, let's take some phone calls. Paul in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, you know, I had been banned by InfoWars when I posted what they thought was something politically incorrect on their website. So and by the way, I was also banned several times where I was thrown off Facebook for 30 days, and this went on until I quit Facebook. And so I kind of see it as a big world out there on the internet, and think about the price of Facebook. It's free. And if I don't like it, what did I lose there? I lost nothing, right? And I just packed my bags and I left, and I don't go back.
Yep.
So they're missing my information and data. So they suffer for it.
And they're also missing the ad revenues because the fewer users they have, the less the advertisers pay.
Exactly. And that's what's so important about all this with these companies is we have to be willing, even though we're small little people in the oceans and just individuals, you know, when all that we individuals add up to millions and millions, it becomes a big loss for them and a big problem, especially with the Facebooks out there, which depend so much on ad revenue and getting people's eyeballs behind the screens. So I do urge people out there, if you don't like it with these companies, here's an idea. Next time you buy a cell phone, go to Galaxy. Buy a Galaxy phone and teach Apple a lesson. And we should also remember that Apple has never really been or not been for a long time an American company. You know, most of their manufacturing, if not all, is in China, right? They're really, their headquarters was in Ireland for quite a while. So they basically love to collect the money overseas and avoid paying taxes in the United States as much as possible. So I would love to actually see if Trump, you know, when you're passing tariffs against the Chinese, also pass tariffs on American manufacturers who manufacture in China and then send it to the United States. Even though they might claim themselves to be Americans, what really does Apple do for America? And now they're getting into the business of censorship.
Well, where is Apple getting into the business of censorship?
Well, they're also one of the ones who are taking, I believe, Alex Jones off of their platform.
Oh, the iTunes. Yeah, they took him off of iTunes.
So there you go. Now, you see, and this is the mistake these people make. Don't take your business and make it political. Any company that decides to be political deserves a public spanking and retribution. And so what we need to do, and I just don't get this about corporations, is boycott the ones who are basically going to censor or trying to steer the agenda or try to politicize their customers. And they have to, the CEOs have to learn the lesson that just remain neutral. The goal of Apple should be just to sell you the best cell phones in the world and with the best quality, all the rest of that, and the best laptops in the world. Okay, fine. But stop politicizing it. Keep that to yourself. Nobody wants to hear Tim Cook's personal agenda. Right? And I don't need to be steered by these elitists out of Silicon Valley into what they think are socially engineered to be little mimics of themselves. Just be happy they got about, hundreds of billions of dollars in the banks in their offshore accounts, and leave it at that. Stop it with the social engineering, because this is what they're up to.
Yes.
And so my advice to people, next time you're thinking about buying that new cell phone, go to Galaxy. Galaxy isn't doing any of that yet, right?
Yep.
I hear they make very good phones, a lot cheaper than Apple, too. I hear you get them like $200, and they're just fine. Save yourself the money. And one other thing before I go, Michael, last week when they were talking about Apple's excellent quarterly earnings, Apple basically said, oh, yeah, because we were charging so much for the phones. In other words, they have so many people duped into the belief of the conspicuous consumption of their little trendy, showing off their $1,000 iPhones, right? Apple
yeah, but that's not
a
viable business plan in this economy anyway, and Apple's already announced they're coming out with a new version that would be only $500.
Right, but they still gouged those people a year ago with $1,000 cell phones, and thousands upon thousands of people lined up at the Apple stores, the suckers, and paid that extra money.
Actually, the iPhone 10 didn't do well at all. In fact, Apple's repeatedly had to cut back on their orders for phones to be manufactured. It's not a hot seller because of that very fact. It's $1,000. People just don't have that kind of money for a cell phone.
Yeah, I can never buy it with Apple. When I was searching for a laptop a while ago, I mean, an Apple laptop is basically 3 times the expense of just a Toshiba or a Dell.
Yeah, well, I do understand that. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials.
Yep, thank you.
We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones to Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, yes, as far as the Antifa, you mean to tell me they're not breaking any laws? As an organization, there's no law, federal statute, or anything else that they're breaking? I mean, they're a terrorist organization. They bring feces and urine to these to try to screw up rallies and try to. I mean, there's all kinds. They should be busted. This is one thing the FBI used to be good at, is they would infiltrate organizations. They used to be said at the communist. If you go to a Communist Party meeting, probably 90% of the people there are FBI undercover agents, and they could infiltrate Antifa. These people are not the smartest people in the world, that's for sure. They should have all kinds of. I mean, if the FBI wanted to do some good for a change instead of just doing not good stuff, yeah, they could bust. There's got to be RICO statutes, conspiracy to foment revolution or something. They could get all these people
to do anything because Antifa is serving some kind of a political purpose for the deep state and for the Democrats. And yeah, they're breaking all kinds of laws left and right. Now, I'm glad that 20 of them got arrested up there at Berkeley because they were causing physical damage, vandalism. They were attacking the police. But you're right. Antifa is not a peaceful group. And if you're not peaceful, there are laws that they are breaking. But again, they seem to be serving somebody's political purpose, and that's why we have the hands-off attitude. There have been allegations of the police literally being ordered to stand back and allow Antifa to do what they're going to do.
On my computer, I got a couple computer problems, Mike. My Windows just quit working. I click on the Windows button. I still get Google Chrome. I can use that for the internet, but the Windows just is not open, period. And I tried some of the remedies that are offered there on these when you go online and look, and nothing seems to work. And then the other problem is plugging the computer into my TV monitor here, which I do sometimes to watch videos or movies. Sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. Maybe I was wondering, maybe I should just buy a new cable for that. That might remedy this.
Yeah, that might fix that one. That might fix that one. As far as the Windows not opening up, you probably need to go to your local Geek Squad or computer repair shop. Anyway, listen, Don, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We've got more news to report. We're coming up on another commercial break here. So getting on back to the banning, apparently Democrats are now circulating plans for the government to take control of the internet and impose regulations on political speech. So there it is, the declaration of war. War on conservatives on the internet, because they're targeting conservative sites here. And even Donald Trump Jr. has come on out saying this is really about purging all conservative media. So Alex Jones was right. There was a war on for your mind. There is a war on for your mind. And we're on the front lines right now. That's why Republic Broadcasting needs your help so much. So they're out there saying, yes, we're going to regulate political speech here, and we're only going to allow true news on there. With, of course, they get to decide what's true or not. And that's just like the old Soviet Union. There's the official story, and that's it. And you are expected to just believe that official story, no matter how ridiculous it is. When Chernobyl blew up, the Soviet government originally told their people there had been no accident. And then when the radiation started ringing alarms all over Europe, the Soviet Union was forced to back up and say, yeah, we had a little kind of a tiny oopsie over there at the reactor here. Apparently, the Republican National Committee had a little embarrassment. Apparently, for months, its website accidentally linked to a porn Twitter account instead of the Maryland Republican Party. Got to check those links. Got to check those links. Now, West Virginia has announced they're going to allow smartphone voting for those serving overseas. And they've developed this app for federal elections. VOATS, was the Boston company, developed it. And basically, when you vote, it takes a picture of your face, and they use facial recognition technology to make sure you are really the person who should be voting there. Now, my first thought is, what happens if the phone's camera is pointed at a photograph of someone whose vote is being stolen? It doesn't strike me that this is a secure system at all. But then none of them are supposed to be secure. This will get hacked. This will definitely get hacked. Alrighty, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a couple of phone calls, starting with Daniel in Canada. Aloha, Daniel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, aloha, Mike. Yeah, I just wanted to mention something that I think everyone's missing about the Alex Jones banning. That, like, the definition of conspiracy is two or more people acting together to get a desired outcome. And no one's mentioning the fact that Apple, Facebook, and YouTube happened to ban him all at the same time. Now, we know that YouTube employs the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL. So I'm just wondering if Apple and Facebook sort of bowed to their pressure as well.
Well, first of all, a lot of people have commented on the fact that all of these tech giants did act apparently in concert to take down Alex Jones. And apparently this is just the start of an all-out war on conservatives on the net. In fact, I was just getting ready to post a video from Lisa Haven saying that there is literally a plan by the Democrats to remove conservatives from the internet. They're going to pass bills. And, of course, that's discrimination. The Equal Protection Clause should apply here. So should the First Amendment. But the Democrats have gone full fascist. And that's the ugly reality here.
Yeah, I think Alex Jones, a lot of his supporters, I mean, they learned a lot about Hillary Clinton before the 2016 election.
Yes.
And coming up on the midterms here, that might be the real motive. I don't think they care about Sandy Hook or any of the other things. Like, some of the excuses they gave for banning him were just ridiculous. And he's been saying this for 20 years or whatever.
Well, I agree that a primary motive is to silence conservatism on the internet ahead of the midterms. But there are those who were involved in various false flag hoaxes perpetrated on the American people. They want the independent media to go away as well. Because they'll come on out, they'll stage a hoax, and it gets ripped apart here on the independent media. It's like the Boston bombing and those backpacks. To me, that was reasonable doubt right there. But Tsarnaev's lawyer literally went into court and told the jury, yep, he did it. You know, what kind of a defense lawyer does that? So there are a lot of people with vested interests, with secrets to keep, who want the independent media to go away. There's the vaccine companies want us to stop pointing out all the research that vaccines are harmful. You've got the GMO companies who want us to stop talking about whether or not GMOs are actually safe. We've reached that stage right now where the American people are just drowning in lies. And we're trying to basically counter it. And the liars are literally declaring war on the truthers.
Yeah, the purge is on. Just for all your listeners out there, this is the time to, open up your pocketbook and just, if you have to give $5 or whatever it is to keep RBN and Mike Rivero and Jordan Stadmiller, keep these guys afloat. All right.
Every little bit helps.
Cheers.
Every little bit helps. All right. Well, Daniel, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Pete in Florida. Aloha, Pete. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, I think anybody that goes from 9/11 as an inside job with all his videos where he had back in the day to where he's now saying that the Saudis were behind 9/11, I think Alex Jones is a hoax. I want to see the documents, the court papers that he's
okay, we've got a bad connection here. We've got a bad connection here. You're breaking up. And again, I don't pay a lot of attention. I don't pay a lot of attention to Alex Jones. I mean, I used to be on his show a lot. We used to sort of get along. We parted company over the issue of Israel. And whether you like Alex Jones or not, or whether you think he's gone in a wrong direction, is irrelevant to the issue that the corporate media has been exposed as nonstop liars to the American people. They don't like that. And they want to make all of the independent media who challenges their credibility to just go away so they can go back to making money and, controlling what the American people think.
Well, I think Alex Jones is probably just another side hoax. I mean, how can you go from telling everybody that it's an inside job? He might have, take a look at everybody who's around Alex Jones. I mean, Stone and Owen Schroyer, these guys are gangsters. I mean, they probably even moved in on his operation. I mean, how can you go from inside job to telling everybody that it was done by the
Well, I don't know. Certainly, I don't agree with Alex Jones on that one. But again, what Alex Jones is saying is irrelevant. The fact that he's being stopped from saying it is the important part. This is a nation founded on that Bill of Rights, and that very first one, freedom of speech. We are allowed to speak our mind and express our honest opinion.
Yeah, you can, but all these people that are banning him is private enterprise. So what are you going to say? What can you say about that? It's just private
we
business.
Simply go to a different private enterprise. I mean, real videos coming online. I'm still waiting for my channel to be approved. Kim.com is setting up a Twitter replacement that won't practice censorship. And people are going to naturally drift over to these just as quickly as they become available. We're already seeing, a lot of these alternative search engines like Yandex and DuckDuckGo, they're doing a brisk business And if Bloomberg is right, and if more of the big advertisers are going to disconnect from the social media corporations over ethics issues, because they don't want to be tarnished with that image. They don't want to be seen as supporting something that is so un-American at its core. We could actually see a major seismic shift in the social media environment, where these old original social media companies are all going to come on down to be replaced with newer, more ethical, more responsible social media platforms.
Well, hopefully the big conglomerates, they're all merging together, Comcast, everybody merging together. Then they're going to start butting in and saying, well, you can't come onto our lines if you got hate speech or if you're going to do these conspiracy theories. We haven't gone up the ladder yet. They can still bring on the big boys and say, you're not going to use our servers. You're not going to use our lines. I don't think there's an end to it, long as it's private. Unless we butt in and say we're going to nationalize these companies, I think private enterprise, this pyramid, is just going to continuously tighten up and, dictate what can be put on their system anytime they want.
Well, at that point, I would say that we need to basically see new internet companies start up on that same model as what Kim.com is doing. I mean, ultimately, the American people will have to make a choice. And I think American people are going to decide they don't want to go with any social media platform or any internet connection that dares tell them what they can see, hear, read, think, or decide. And Americans need to get angry about this one. They really do. This is an attack on what it means to be an American, an attack on our freedom of speech. Anyway, Pete, your phone line is breaking up, so I'm going to let you go. And we're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, it's regarding the Venezuelan flying bomb assassination attempt.
Yes.
The day that it happened, I was watching a montage of local video clips from different angles, from different sources. And one of them showed the building where the alleged flying bomb had crashed into a building. And there's an open debate right now whether or not, there's an open debate whether or not that was the firefighters telling the truth that it was just a gas explosion, or if the government is telling the truth that it's a flying drone.
Well, there is a video of an actual drone. Somebody got it on their cell phone camera. The drone was just flying in, and it exploded prematurely, apparently. And Venezuela is saying that they do have electronics to keep drones away from the president when he's out there making speeches, because things are very tense right now.
Right. So that was not the drone that crashed into the building, correct?
No.
Right. So I'm only referring to the drone that crashed into the building. Is that the video evidence shows that it was not a drone that crashed into the building. I'm not saying that there was not the drone that you saw, but what I'm saying is that what it shows is two windows that both have screens on them, look like ornamental wrought iron screens, and there is heavy black smoke that is stained the bricks above both of these open windows that have these screens on it. And it clearly shows that the firefighters are telling the truth about that part, that there was no damage to these screens.
Well,
there was no object that crashed.
Hang on. Mateus, how do you know the drone didn't crash into the building through a window on the side that didn't have bars and started the fire that way? I mean, your argument is actually pretty thin. Anyway, Mateus, thanks a lot for the phone call. I need to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got a lot of news to get through here. All right, getting back on over to the FCC. Apparently, the FCC fabricated the claims of a DDoS attack during the net neutrality fight. And apparently, this came back in May of 2017. John Oliver of Last Week Tonight was asking viewers to flood the FCC comment section with support for net neutrality legislation. And the FCC claimed that they'd been hit with a DDoS attack. And apparently this was the second time Bray made this baseless claim. He did it also back in 2014. So again, more hoax, more fraud, so forth and so on. Down in Brazil, a Brazilian judge has suspended the use of products containing the agrochemical glyphosate. And more and more, the rest of the world is waking on up to just how dangerous this chemical is. The World Health Organization has declared it a probable human carcinogen. And the EPA and the FDA just turning a blind eye on that. Even worse, the Environmental Protection Agency has enacted what they call a significant new rule, allowing companies to use asbestos in manufacturing again. Now, asbestos was banned for a very good reason. Those little fine mineral particles get into your lungs. They cause all kinds of problems like mesothelioma. Look at all those first responders to 9/11 who breathed in all that asbestos from the World Trade Towers after being told by the head of the EPA the air was safe down there. And they're dealing with all kinds of medical crises. And so EPA is apparently bowed to industry pressure. Industry wants to go back to using asbestos. It's less expensive, and who cares if people get sick? We're just here making money. All right, let's take another phone call here from Joe in Eastern Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to talk about Alex Jones being suppressed and censored by these social media networks and Facebook and Apple. I mean, I get TuneIn, and I was going to listen to him today, and it doesn't even allow me to listen to his show. And
I think he's moved over to BitChute. He's moved over to BitChute now. That's where his program is.
Well, it was on TuneIn. I mean, I just found it odd that I was listening to it yesterday there, and then today it's not there. So I figured it's all part of this, what's happening with his being suppressed.
Yep.
But I'm more alarmed by that. I think the timing of this, that something big is getting ready to happen. And I mean, for me, I got a 30-day suspension on Facebook this morning for a post I made 6 months ago. And it's like they looked it up and you know, suspended me today out of all the days. And I wonder how many other people this is happening to. And I see that Senator Warner from Virginia, and he's a super creep, I must say, he's talking about how the government has to protect the institutions and protect the government and pass some kind of rules for social media. And, you know, it just seems like they're getting prepared for a big move. And I don't know if it's like, I had a strange suspicion before 9/11, you know, the way they were demonizing bin Laden before it even happened. It's like they do pre-work before they do one of these things. It's very, you know, it's kind of like game theoried out, and they do their pre-propaganda, and they take down important people that might be working against them. So I kind of got that vibe now, and I think I called the White House, and I called my senators and my congressmen about that you know, what happened to Alex Jones and how we should have free speech in this country. And I think Trump, I like Trump, but what I don't understand is he has all the power in his hands. He has the power to fire Mueller. He has the power to fire Sessions. He has the power to raise the alt-right up and have different press at his stated, you know, at his press conferences, and he doesn't do it. And I just, if he does, something happens with Trump, he has nobody to blame but himself. I mean, it's really, I pull my hair out saying, why doesn't he do these things? And he doesn't. So unless there's some master plan that I don't know about, I feel very disturbed about what I'm witnessing.
Well, I do too, and here's why. Trump has to understand it was the independent media that put him into that Oval Office, especially Alex Jones. And Trump is, at least for the moment, seems to be just turning his back on him. Talk about an utter betrayal here. And Trump, if Trump is seriously thinking about running again in 2020, if he lets the Democrats shut down conservative independent media, he's a one-term president. And I don't know why he doesn't understand that.
Well, I'm hoping it's part of his genius that I've seen before, that it's part of a grand plan, and he's going to drop the bomb as far as information or whatever, and rain. That's the only hope I really have. If it was me, I'd be, I do hear that Alex was on Michael Savage's show tonight. I didn't listen to it. I'll probably catch the rebroadcast tomorrow, and that'll be very interesting. I think that they might. I mean, this might backfire. I just saw on Fox Business Channel they were talking about Alex Jones and Facebook, and like you said, what's the word? Like, no publicity is worse than any publicity. I mean, Alex Jones is probably getting all kinds of people checking him out.
Yeah, well, the phrase you're looking for is even bad PR is better than no PR. And yeah, this could provoke a real backlash. This could galvanize the American people to finally stand up and say, enough of this nonsense here. Anyway, listen, thank you for the phone call, Joe. We got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. Now, out here in Hawaii, Hurricane Hector is expected to brush by the Big Island tomorrow, and it will be sort of close to us Wednesday night, Thursday morning, but the current predicted track has it so far south, we may not see much of anything here on Oahu. Unfortunately, the southern end of the Big Island, while the eye of the storm will not be there, there will be a huge amount of rain pouring on down and the wind, and it's not like those people haven't suffered enough down there. So hold a good thought for those people down there on the Big Island. Now, interestingly enough, at the city of Point Pleasant Borough, New Jersey, the police were called to take down a kids' lending library. Now, apparently in this town, there is this sort of tradition where people will have these little tiny boxes, very decorated, very pleasant, out at the front of their driveway, in which will be books they've read that they no longer want. And they're simply there for people to just take and read and bring back or put in their own boxes. It seems very, very harmless, but apparently the police are now cracking down on these, little lending libraries at the behest of city code enforcers who are saying that they received a complaint about the lending libraries. And so the police apparently have nothing better to do than to go around to these homes and demand that these mailbox libraries be immediately dismantled because there was a complaint. So it's like book burning has come back to this country. Real books this time, not just the internet. All right, so we're coming up here on the end of the program. I want to go back and touch on the situation with Alex Jones. It is very troubling, especially now because other people are being dropped. And it's basically proving that Facebook is morally spineless, and I'm not surprised that one advertiser has dropped them. And I hope that Bloomberg is right. More will follow. So apparently Alex Jones has also now been removed from LinkedIn and MailChimp. But according to this article out of CNET.com, is still up on Instagram. They're saying Alex Jones is still up on Twitter, but I'm not sure. Apparently Pinterest has taken down InfoWars page after multiple people flagged the conspiracy theory account to the company. See, here's the problem. Things get taken down because of a complaint. These companies never check if the complaint is valid. You could go into a page that's about making cupcakes, and you could say, this is a hate site, and they could actually get taken down. But the age of censorship is honest. This is the end of the First Amendment. There's the official story, and the government's sticking with it. This is the corporate story. So these are very dark times. And again, please support Republic Broadcasting. Please support whatreallyhappened.com. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up there in Vancouver. And take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.